Again, why I picked this topic, and I was going to do this with my colleague Lindsay today, Lindsay Middleton. She's not able to be here, but I will talk about her service. She's a person with lived experience of addictions, as well as the criminal justice system. And she has a remarkable story of transformation, and has developed her own service, which is using CrossFit to help promote connection to the community in recovery. And she has the first ever CrossFit gym in a Category C prison up in Lancaster, and they've just now become, I think, charity status, and they really want to grow this in different prison systems as well, because it does promote, as you can probably imagine, physical health. Physical exercise promotes well-being in so many different ways, and it also promotes growth in community capacity and recovery community when they can leave the prison. So I'll be talking about her service a little later. But yeah, so the hope for me is, understanding, and I'll look at my notes because I've got a few definitions on there, but it's really understanding that a compassionate outlook is important and needed because the way in which we have approached addictions, addictive processes, and now understanding and conceptualizing addictive processes might not be perceived as compassionate by the people who are experiencing it. So before I get to the compassionate model approach, I need to kind of establish why maybe I think through my work, my research and my practice work, it's maybe not currently. And I think as a church community, we have a massive opportunity to step into that. Right, okay. So let's hope this works. That has worked. So the kind of rough agenda, hopefully I'm not going to talk for much long like last time. But first I want to start with some historical perspectives on addictions, how we have conceptualized and understood addictions, the term addictions, what it is, throughout history, and how that has also shaped how we have traditionally approached it in treatment. Before I then go into talking about recovery science, which is something very separate, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, but there's a separate body of work and literature that is just simply focusing on recovery and not treatment as such. And then I will talk about Lindsay's service a little bit as a case study to kind of give you an idea of what a recovery service, a recovery-informed service looks like. And then I will get to that compassionate model. Okay. So, really quick whistle-stop tour. The word addict, and again I've got all the references on there, so hopefully you can read up on it when you want to. The word addict really comes from Latin, addictus, means slave to, and the Romans used this word actually to refer to their slaves. So this stems from a myth of Addictus, who was a slave, who had chains on his body, and throughout the time he became actually quite comfortable having the chains on his body, and then that was his state of being. So the understanding that addiction is a social problem, as we know it now, and a health problem, is quite new. So before the 15th century, we can probably all imagine, there wasn't a lot of clean water, so fermented drinks, ales and wine was consumed. It's quite normal to do that. In the 15th, 17th, 18th century, that changed. The first ever recorded statement from an inebriate, who was James Chambers, was in 1795, and he said that his alcohol made him lose control over his consumption. And the temperance movement populated this idea and promoted the idea that losing control over consumption is a sin, it's a symptom of sin. It's a symptom of having a weak spirit, a weak will, a weak character, being possessed by demons, all these spiritual things. In the 19th century, so that's more towards the sort of 60s, before the 60s, 50s, 60s, it slightly changed into an understanding that addiction is a physiological predisposition. So the narrative was such that you had, for example, an alcohol gene, or it was heritage through your family, and you have this predisposition, which is why you're suffering from these processes. Then in the 60s and 70s onwards, and this is sort of the idea that we have nowadays, is kind of prevailing dominant understanding of addiction is that it is a biomedical issue, it's a disease of the brain. They also call it the brain disease model of addiction, and that is still, to this day, the dominant understanding. This is the predominant definition that currently still stands. There are other organizations, particularly in the United States, which have come up with some conceptualizations, but this one is still the dominant one, which is also used to build treatment models on it. And this is from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, which is an organization in the United States, and they clearly have stated that addiction is a chronic relapsing brain disease. And I think, again, everything I'm saying here today is maybe take with a pinch of salt and maybe think about, all I want to do is promote a different perspective and a different understanding, and so just keep that in mind. And with that, I'm saying keep in mind the language we're using as well, whether we say things like addict or freedom from addiction or, I love Jesus, you need Jesus, I need Jesus. All of those things, some people might understand them in the way that we want them to be understood. What does freedom mean? Freedom from addiction, what is that for you? And is that the same for everybody? And I think, using terminology can really make or break it sometimes. I know a lot of people with lived experience want to refer to themselves as addicts. It's completely fine, but it should always be up to the person themselves to identify with whatever they want to identify. And I think throughout history, as I'll get into this now, you see that actually the way that we promote treatment and facilitate treatment is quite prescriptive. And this is something that I've come to a conclusion when I did my research, that actually, who am I to tell people what their recovery pathway should look like? I'm not the one walking in their shoes, and I think we all have different capacity levels. You can't really compare someone who might grow up in a very loving environment versus someone who might not have these resources. It's really hard to then say, your walk with your recovery pathway should look the same. So just to, maybe keep that a little bit in mind. So, the way in which we define, conceptualize, and understand addiction shapes how we approach it in treatment. So, again, like George in Britain, we have the model and the choice and the moral model, which basically says we understood addiction as a sort of sin, as a weak spirit issue, character issue, and therefore the way in which it was sort of approached in treatment or in support was to say, well, you have a choice, you can just stop it, or go pray, go figure, repent, whatever. And the word choice always is still being thrown around a lot in treatment and in recovery, so we'll get to that. But that was the main way of thinking. And then obviously with the understanding it's a physiological issue, it's an issue of your brain structure, brain chemicals, all of those things. The treatment then becomes such that the person with addiction issues is seen as a patient in need of a cure. They need to come to an expert, to a clinician. They need to get maybe medicine. When you see a GP or a treatment specialist, for these issues, you're very, very often given medication as a sort of first choice, and then some, sessions of psychotherapy or seeing a psychiatrist or, a variety of specialists. In the literature, we also have a kind of understanding about treatment for health conditions through the biopsychosocial model of health and illness. Some of you might know this, which was first promoted by Engel in the 70s. And this was sort of a clear move away from the patient, the responsibility being on the patient for being sick, and the kind of overall blame being on the patient for being sick and being in the condition you're in, and to a more holistic, system-wide concern, where it's about not just your biology and your psychology, but maybe also your social environment, different upbringing, different social status that you might have, and all of this is a connection and produces a condition in which you then develop this issue. So these are kind of currently prevailing approaches. We hear these words holistic, trauma-informed, and all of these kind of phrases as well thrown around in treatment, and this is kind of, again, based on how we understand and conceptualize addiction. And I would say this, when I have spoken with people with addiction issues, and I've worked with them as, in capacity as counselling as well as research, a lot of times people would say things like, yes, it's like a disease, and it's, there is an element of choice, but again, it's up to whatever fits for this person and however they want to understand their addiction. So I always kind of take a step back, and in the service I worked at, we were always quite keen on not prescribing or having an agenda for how their work needs to look like, but we'd say, what do you want? How do you want to live your life? And if that is abstinence, that's great. If that is harm reduction, reducing drinking, reducing using, or other addictive processes, that is up to you, and I'm here to help you. So that was quite important to me. So that is kind of the treatment understanding. Now I'm talking a little bit more about recovery. So over the years, I'd say over the last 15 years, there was a massive shift which promoted this idea of recovery. And again, when we think about the medical terms, recovery and being a chronic health issue and a chronic relapsing condition, that we very much approach, and it's the same with mental health, addiction issues and mental health, in the way that we approach physical health. And it's not always the reality for everybody, and not everyone wants their recovery to look the same, and there are some people who have what we call natural recovery. They never ever go to treatment, and they just stop using or stop engaging in their addictive process, and we don't know why. Or there are people who need really long-term intensive support, and they go from rehab to rehab, and that works for them. So it's kind of to keep in mind what we mean by those terms. Recovery science is really something that was based on actually two things. One was an experiment that was done by Bruce Alexander, who did this rat park experiment. Maybe some of you know about this. So he basically had two enclosures for rats. One was highly enriched, lots of enrichment, playthings, lots of rats in there, and the other enclosure wasn't. So there was no enrichment, it was only one rat in isolation. But in both these enclosures, there was an option to drink water as well as heroin. For the rats, they were provided with water and heroin. And he found out that actually the rats that were in the enclosure with the enrichment, they chose to use the heroin less often than the rats that were in the enclosure by themselves, in isolation, with nothing to do. And basically this promoted the understanding that, okay, recovery is very much having something meaningful to do, and having someone to love or feeling like they belong, and having somewhere to be. And then the other part of this, really, where recovery was based on, was this research project called Project Match. And some of you might know about it, but basically it was a 3-year study, a trial where people with alcohol issues were, there was a group of them, they wanted to find out, okay, is treatment, one-on-one clinical treatment with the clinician, as helpful as it is for those people to actually sit in a group of peers or recoveries, for example, in a church building, like in a fellowship, AA, NA meeting, and talking about their experiences. Is it as effective as getting psychotherapy or clinical treatment? And what they found actually is that it's just as effective. So seeking treatment from a clinician, a 6 session of psychotherapy, let's say, is just as effective or no less effective or no more effective than for people who don't seek treatment. You just sit in a group with their peers talking about their experiences. And so these were really kind of foundational building blocks for this recovery movement, and William White was quite interested in this kind of understanding that recovery is maybe something different than treatment, and it involves different sectors. So recovery science came up with, this is a research collaborative by Brown and Ashford in 2019. They came up with this definition that actually recovery is not so much just the absence of illness symptoms, so saying, okay, you're drug-free or you're not, but it is actually an individualized, intentional, dynamic, and relational process involving sustained efforts to improve wellness. So again, there's no outcome effectively, it's to improve wellness, and that looks different for different people. There's no timeline on this process, it's quite ongoing, and it might involve going back and forth a little bit for different people. But overall, it is improving their wellness. And it's also, this is something that I found really interesting when I was interviewing some people who had relapsed multiple times. And I wanted to understand how they understood recovery after they had these experiences. And they actually told me they didn't really like the word relapse. They said relapse really makes it sound like I'm back at square one, when in actual fact, in the time that I was in recovery, considered recovered, I was able to get a job, I was able to mend relationships with friends or family, I was able to get my kids back. I mean, there's so much going on in their lives that, yes, it felt like they were back at square one, but it really wasn't. And I felt that this was really reducing their efforts to improve wellness. So I think this is a much more inclusive understanding of recovery. It is not yet really infiltrating the way in which we practice and provide treatment, because we're still very much looking for an outcome. It's very outcome driven, the way in which we practice. And we also see, I think particularly in this country with mental health conditions, if you've got someone with addiction issues, drug and alcohol services can help to an extent. Very often they will realize actually you're using because of something, and it's highly relevant. It's because of some mental health condition or some trauma or some underlying cause. So why don't you work on that first? And so then they're being sent to mental health services, specialist services, other relevant services, where they're being told they are not complex enough, because in fact you need to have a disorder to get the support you need. And hopefully I'm not powering off, because that would be awful.
No, just move the mouse around a little bit.
Oh, I am.
It's probably a Kelly, isn't it?
Oh, it's project. Thank you. Saved it. Okay. So yeah, so there's this this massive gap where our service users don't really know where to go. You say, I can't go to work on my mental health, I can't go to work on my addictive issues, I don't know what to do. And then kind of keeping in mind where the church can slot into help. But so this was the foundational basis for recovery science, this new field of study, and we have since as well had some colleagues developing a lovely conceptualization of recovery through recovery capital theory, first developed by Klein and Granfield in '99. And recovery capital is this fancy word for the breadth and depth of internal and external resources that can be drawn upon to initiate and sustain recovery. So there on the right-hand side you see what they now call the recovery capital screener. The RCS 36 is a screening tool of 36 questions. They are related to these different domains. We have the personal capital domain, the social capital domain, the community capital domain. And this was developed by Best and colleagues a couple of years ago. And I find this a really useful understanding to actually quantify what we mean by recovery and the different, it really captures these nuances of someone's recovery journey, where we can really highlight, okay, how have we done in this personal category or in the social category. And this was also really important because historically, when service users would come to treatment, it was inherently deficit-based. The way in which we would ask questions, the first intake sessions, we would very often have this long list of questions, go, okay, so tell me what's wrong with your health, your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, your job, tell me about all of these issues in your life. And it's really difficult for someone who's in a vulnerable position in the first place to come and finally go, okay, I'm going to seek help. And then you're confronted with all of this stuff you don't want to think about. This is mainly why you're using. Anyways, so this is a whole different approach because now we have an opportunity to go, let's explore what are your resources, what are your strengths, what are the things that can help you sustain recovery, and what are some barriers, where might we need to improve and work on those barriers to develop them into your resources. So it's a very different approach. So this has been developed over time. I was recently involved in a project where we tested this kind of understanding the recovery capital as a form of care planning. And this was a really lovely opportunity for us to see how people approach care planning, which is such a sensitive thing that you do with your key worker as a service user, where you actually start to think and begin to think about your life after treatment. And what are some goals, what are some long-term, some short-term goals, what helps you get there, really kind of make things more concrete, detailed, and it was just a really lovely opportunity to help people get starting to think more positively about their lives. We found that this was hugely beneficial for service users because they actually had, if you think about care planning and treatment, how we provide it it's very often on an online system the service user has no connection to, just sit in front of a treatment provider, typing some notes into this online system, and you never really see the notes, and it's not really being discussed, it's just reviewed in review sessions. So having something like this on paper where they collaboratively work on their goals, their resources, and they think about their resources and their strengths and some of these development areas, it was really, it felt like they could look back over their life and think, wow, these are all the things that I have in order to help me in my recovery. It's a complete different shift. So I think promoting this way of working is huge for in science and practice. It's it's a paradigm shift, really. Over the last, I'd say,
we lost our Kelly.
I'm so glad you were in this meeting because maybe somehow we knew this was going to happen. Thank you.
There we go. You're now officially the person on deck on that side, yeah?
Yeah. I don't want that.
Okay, so moving on before the TV show off again, we have. Oh gosh. What's Netflix?
No, Netflix.
We're back.
So, we got recent policy shifts as well, which have taken this recovery capital notion a little further, and there has been a movement that's come over from the United States, which is called recovery residencies, and these are services that basically 75%, I'm just going to go back one slide before I get into this, 75% of the staff are actually people with lived experience, and they're considered peer workers. And they're trained in safeguarding, they're trained in the kind of understandings and concepts.
Which system is that, Michael? Whereabouts is that?
Sorry, what was the question?
You mentioned that 75% of the workers are peer.
Yes, sorry, in
Have
the
lived
recovery services, yeah.
Across the UK?
No, this is in the United States.
In the US, okay.
So, yeah, so sorry. So before I get into this, because we're talking about this as part of the lived experience recovery organizations, which is what is in the UK, and this came over from the United States, where these services are called recovery residencies. And these services are services that are made up of, the majority of their staff are people with lived experiences. They're in recovery. And these services offer really crucial community connection support and building recovery community. When I talk about it, it's very similar to actually what the church does, but it's basically offering a way for people to come, be as they are. They don't need to be anyone else. They are not. They don't need to have any form of. They don't need to be abstinent. They don't need to, they just can come as they are, but they're being offered support for whatever they need. So the understanding is that peers come and reach out to the community and say, come and stop by our service, come have a drink with us, by that I mean a tea, and just hang out with us. We can give you lifts to your appointments if you need some. You can hang out with us if you don't have a home, and we can help you do some, get some paperwork. It's basically a human-to-human connection. Now, these LEROs, lived experience recovery organizations, have different focuses though. One of them, the emphasis would be on mental health, substance use, domestic violence. Another organization, a really lovely organization up in Leeds, it's brilliant. They're called Bars Behind Bars. And it's this guy who was in prison, and he had this idea of really helping the guys in prison help connect and think about recovery and think about their lives outside of prison and building community. And he started to make soap, and he used different essential oils. I mean, these are amazing soaps. I had bought some. And what they do is they actually bring people from after prison back into the service, go, if you're interested, so there's soap making workshops in prison, but if they're out, they're very welcome to join. They have, you can have a tea, a biscuit, hang out, have conversations, help make soap, and help bring those to the market to sell to the community and have the community involved. And I think this is a really lovely engagement opportunity, and for the community as well to hear from firsthand what it's like and what about recovery and what made you come here. And so these are services that reach out in ways that treatment facilities and treatment providers really can't. And so these LEROs, I've put this up. This is a recent policy shift update. It came out in 2021 or 2 and updated this year, where they introduced this notion of recovery and lived experience recovery organisations in the UK. I think now we've got a total of 45 recovery organisation leaders like this.
We have one in Bristol.
We have one. Which one is it? The College of Lived Experience Recovery Organisations, CLERO in Fansworth. They have a website where they put a map out on where these services are in the UK. And basically what is really nice for these services, well, they're connecting social enterprises with people in recovery. So they are bringing restaurant owners, people from different social enterprises in the city and the environment, to bring them together and say, can we promote recoveries? Can we hire them, first of all? Can they have a job here? Can the job environment be such that they can actually work out their recovery if they need to go to meetings, for example, if they follow the 12-step program? Is there a way, maybe not for alcohol to be served? You know, things like this, where actually we are bridging this gap between including them in society again, and also not prescribing to them how they need to be. If they want to be in recovery in one way and they're not quite ready yet to take that next step to say, I want to be fully abstinent, or, you know, I want to try this, if there's a space for them now, they're not just being pinged back and forth between. And this is why they put this diagram up. They said, you know, actually in isolation, these three different types of services, so we got traditional treatment services, we got recovery support services, and then which can be initiatives to promote recovery traditionally, and then we got these lived experience recovery organizations. All three of them are crucial to promote inclusivity, engagement in the community, and this kind of long-term understanding of recovery, which might not always be very clear-cut, as we think it needs to be. So this is still currently being developed. We're hoping that more and more services can come up. Linking with community is really crucial. I think Birmingham has just become the first recovery city in the UK. They have done a phenomenal job linking in. They had, I think it was last year, they had this massive recovery walk where they invited lots of stakeholders and they marched across the city, I think. And it was really powerful actually to bring people together from a variety of walks of life, and also helping people to be included when they have traditionally been excluded.
Sorry, where was that?
That was in Birmingham.
In Birmingham?
Yeah.
Are you in Birmingham?
Here is Lindsay. So again, I talked about bars behind bars, but this is another organisation, and this is Lindsay's the 180 project, not the 190 project. I know that happened. And she's a person with lived experience. She had this idea of, I think after she got out of prison, she was starting recovery, and she pinged back and forth between different rehabs. I mean, her story is amazing. I wish she could have been here today. But she found that when she did physical exercise, it really gave her something that other activities couldn't give her. It's this kind of, you know, the mental fitness, the mental resilience, learning to collaborate with others. In physical exercise, sometimes you need to work in a team, you need to communicate, there's different hierarchies in the team, and it was a real, it's recovery in a different sense. You know, it's, yes, one thing is getting off of your substances or stopping the processes that you're engaged in. Another thing is to build yourself up to live in wellness and well-being in the way that you want to. So I have a video clip of her service and of them being interviewed, and I hope this works now, but it would be lovely for you to listen in. Communities have in outreach activities is to come alongside someone and until they're ready to run the next step. Last part, hopefully, just going to get through this really quickly. So hopefully you can maybe understand a little bit why perhaps traditionally how we have been practicing and approaching addictions and addictive processes has maybe been a little bit limited and has maybe not considered the variety of unique pathways that addictions and recovery can take for people. Now there's a shift, and it's more and more towards recovery and recovery-orientated environments and societies. But lastly, I would like to introduce maybe something else, which is something that I've come across in my own practice. I've trained in this method called internal family systems therapy. So I'm an IFS, a short IFS therapist, and this is sort of the model that I want to promote today, or not promote, but introduce. So when we think of ourselves, and again, it's sort of promoting not an either/or approach, but a both and. You can be both engaged in an activity that you don't want to do, an addictive process. You can have anxiety, depression, and you can also be a good father, a good mother, a good family member, a good employee, a lover of Jesus, a follower of Jesus. So it's not either or, it's always both and. Life is so colourful. And we, for some people, like complete abstinence is just not the reality, and it's also maybe not something they can ever achieve, but it's what we do in the midst of that. How do we still help this person on the walk towards recovery in the way they want it to look like? So this promotes the idea that we all have multiple parts of us, and effectively we have this internal core self, this, you might want to say it's the Holy Spirit in us, it's God in us, but it's this core self that is compassionate and curious and kind and caring and calm and lots of C words actually. But we also are made up of multiple other parts which are in relationship. So we have parts that are very much future orientated, that help us get through day-to-day tasks. Those are the parts that remind us to do things, get the kids from school, meet the deadline, make sure you write the report, buy groceries, cook dinner, la la la. They get us through stuff, and these are the managing parts of us. However, you can also at the same time have a part that doesn't want to do that. So we might call them destructors. So these are parts that are very much present focused. They're the parts that might want us to take us away from the current moment, and they go, oh, I just wish, we start fantasizing or dreaming, or we go engage in activities, sports, exercise, using consuming substances, playing video games, workaholics, work. So we engage in activities, and they have a different agenda for us. At the same time, we also carry parts of us that are maybe a little bit more vulnerable. There's other parts of us that feel maybe less than, not good enough, hopeless, in some ways scared, afraid, abandoned, shamed, are vulnerabilities. And the system is so that the future-orientated managing parts and the distracting parts help us to not feel our vulnerabilities. So they work really hard for us. And I guess, think about this, when you're sitting, maybe you're doing it right now, you're sitting here and you're listening to me, and then you think, well, this lunch was actually not really that great. I wonder what I'm going to have after this. Maybe coffee. We kind of have these different things going around, different thoughts at the same time. Or you might want to diet, and you're someone who's like, I really need to lose weight, I really need to diet, I need to go to the gym, exercise, work out, whatever, and at the same time you think, I just really want that ice cream. We all do it, like it's very normal. But what I'm kind of suggesting when we have people in the process of addictions, And I guess I'm saying this because addictive processes can be absolutely anything and everything. You know, every single activity you can do to an excess. You can do excessive sleeping, excessive lying, excessive beautification. I had a client once, she did absolutely every beautification surgery that there is in this world, and carried a lot of shame around it. You know, excessive video gaming, gambling, you know, alcohol consumption. Anyways, just absolutely everything you can do to excess. And you know, if you have someone stuck in this cycle of, okay, I'm drinking, I'm using drugs, I'm binging and purging, and I can't stop, I feel out of control, I don't know what to do. They very often at the same time have a part of them that goes, I hate that I do that. You know, people with disordered eating, very often they've got a part of them that binges, get everything in, then purges, excessively purging, and then right after excessively shaming, self-shaming. I can't believe I've done this again. What are people going to say? You know, they have this cycle going round and round, and they can't stop. And I've got 5 minutes left. Right. And so it's a cycle. And if we understand this about us and people who are extremely polarized in these parts, where you've got an absolute extreme, you know, people they need to drink 1-2 bottles of wine each day, they pass out from drinking, they wake up in the morning at 3 a.m. and they feel so ashamed. They go, I can't believe I've done this again, and they feel so ashamed, and either they go back to drinking more, pass out again, same thing, or they go excessively self-critiquing, self-blaming, going, I have to stop, I'm going to seek treatment, something's got to stop. So it's a massive polarization and internal stretch. So what we hope to promote actually is internal balance, right? So if we understand why these parts work so hard for us, why is it that you need to drink 2 bottles of wine each day? What is that part doing for you? And what's it concerned will happen to you if it doesn't do it? You know, what happens if you don't drink 2 bottles of wine? And now, you know, some of these fears, some of these concerns come up, and you can work with that. And I think if we have people in front of us who are engaging in these activities, if we can just stop saying, just stop it, or let me show you a better way, and it just engage them and just asking them why is this part doing what it's doing? How is it helping you? What does it want for you? And we can actually help interrogate some of these people can help explore themselves. And it is a more, you know, I guess at the end of the day, we are seeing people, we're not pathologizing people for what they're experiencing. And we're saying, okay, look, this part is just helping you not feel abandoned or not feel shamed. And if people have excessive trauma in their lives, experienced traumatic stress, you know, these parts help them not feel this again and take them away from these difficult feelings. So it's for us to develop more compassion towards these processes and what people are going through, but also maybe understanding, okay, I don't need to prescribe how someone's recovery needs to look like or someone's process needs to look like. I'm just here to listen to you and be there for you and maybe help you connect to resources until you're ready to dig deeper and then maybe seek treatment in a more intensive way. So it's a very rough oversight, but if you have more questions, then feel free to connect. There are some resources on here, and I will send the slides, so you've got it. But I would encourage you, if you're interested in this sort of thing, maybe to check out the book called Altogether You. I forgot the author, but it talks about this model within a spiritual context. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.